So, as many of you are aware, the ongoing infrastructure negotiations have really ramped up and taken a turn with the progressive or more progressive members of the caucus, including Nancy Pelosi, and the more moderate conservative Democrats are not really Democrats; they're Republicans in Democrat clothing. You can't call these people Democrats, but they're going head to head over the infrastructure legislation. Of course, they want their bipartisan bill passed, the $1 trillion bill, but the more liberal, progressive people want their $3.5 trillion bill, which overwhelmingly helps the American people and has a lot of positive stuff in their past. But of course, they're met with opposition. I have a Newsweek article that gives us sheds a little bit of light on why they're doing that and how this is all unfolding. So bear with me here for a little bit. The small group of conservative Democratic lawmakers who've been threatening to help Republicans halt Democrats' budget package have accepted more than $3 million from donors in the pharmaceutical and fossil fuel industries that could see reduced profits if the plan passes. As the House reconvenes today to tackle the budget reconciliation process, 9 Democrats legislators have been promising to kill their party's $3.5 trillion budget bill until Congress first passes a separate. Nah, not doing it. Not doing it. Smaller infrastructure spending measure, which has garnered some Republican support, and it did. 19 Republicans defected to vote for it. I believe it was 69-30. We will vote against a budget resolution if the infrastructure package isn't brought up first, Democratic Rep. Josh Gottheimer told the Washington Post this weekend, though the American Prospect reported on Sunday that several of the legislators now indicated they could back down. So what that means is, out of the 9 moderate Democrats that were against it, I've already seen that the American Prospect has reported that a couple of them have already retracted their statements and backed down and may fall in line and vote for this more progressive legislation, $3.5 trillion partisan bill. The article goes on, in the narrowly divided House, obstruction from these conservative Democrats could decouple the infrastructure and budget measures from one another. Many believe that would kill the latter by getting conservative Democrats in the Senate, such as Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, get the infrastructure bill they want without having to provide the votes necessary to enact the much larger and more progressive budget measure. Now, as stated previously, these people, these 9 corporate Democrats, are allies of Big Pharma, the fossil fuel industries, among many others, right? They're incredibly corrupt. They base their ideology off of who fuels their political campaigns and who gives them their means of subsistence, how they get their money from these donations, right? So the reconciliation bill is still being negotiated, and many Democratic lawmakers, including those in key swing districts, are pushing for it to include, and this is very, very vital here, long promised legislation to allow Medicare to use its enormous purchasing power to negotiate lower prices for prescription drugs. The pharmaceutical industry has aggressively lobbied against the initiative, which the Congressional Budget Office has estimated will save Medicare $345 billion in medicine costs. So for those of you that aren't aware, the United States of America, unlike every other industrialized nation, does not negotiate for lower drug prices for its population, right? So Big Pharma can just come in and jack up rates and jack up cost and charge you whatever, and you get screwed. And this is, a lot of this is attributed to the fact that other countries negotiate for their population, so they get all their screwing done out of us, right? And the fact that we don't negotiate for lower drug prices is completely voluntary. There's nothing stopping us from doing this, but as you see, they're trying to push legislation to allow Medicare to do so. And the pharmaceutical industry is coming out and saying, whoa, 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 you're getting in the way of our profits. We can't allow you to do this. I know, incredibly corrupt. This is horrendous from them, right? But we expect nothing less from the pharmaceutical industry. The 9 House Democrats threatening to derail the reconciliation bill have raked in nearly $1.2 million from donors in the pharmaceutical and health products industries, according to data compiled by Open Secret. So there you go. There you go. They're taking money from Big Pharma, and they want to block legislation that would help the American people as a result of it. There you go. Typical American politician. There you go. Among them are 2 of the Democratic top recipients of healthcare industry money. Gottheimer, $228,000, and Schrader, $614,000. That's absolutely amazing. And then it goes on to talk about the fossil fuel donors. Democratic leaders are also considering using the reconciliation bill to pass a measure that could force oil and gas companies to pay $500 billion in damages for past carbon pollution. The 9 Democrats threatening to kill the GOP, to help the GOP kill the reconciliation bill, have vacuumed in nearly $2.5 million from donors in the oil and gas industry. So hopefully you get the picture. I don't really need to read too more. They're taking money from oil and gas. They're taking money from big pharma, and the provisions in the bill directly go against the interests of those industries. So it crackdowns on carbon emissions, because we're heading towards an ecological catastrophe. So there's provisions in the bill for climate. There's also provisions in the bill for healthcare and Medicare. And of course, big pharma and the healthcare industries don't want that at all, because that gets in the way of their profits, right? Because they value profit more than anything. And you have these 9 corporate Democrats, although some may have defected, are standing in the way of this legislation because it's good. I mean, that's really the only way to put it. And Kirsten Sinema came out with a statement saying that she won't bend, she won't support this no matter what. I greatly challenge that. And Pelosi and the Democrats in Congress should greatly challenge that as well. And Joe Biden should find it somewhere in his heart, something, an emotion that cares for the working people of this country and for the people of this country in general, and find a spine and go to Kirsten Sinema and to all the other corporate Democrats that may be holding out, and really give it to them and tell them, make them fall in line. You're the most powerful person in this country. You have the power and the will to do it if you want to. And I want to read to you this paragraph from Joe Manchin, and just to outline how deluded of an individual he is. He says it would send a terrible message to the American people if this bipartisan bill is held hostage. I urge my colleagues in the House to move swiftly to get this once-in-a-generation legislation to the president's desk or his signature. No, you know what would send a terrible message to the American people? If you hold out so they don't get to reap the benefits from what's in the $3.5 trillion budget bill. Yeah, that's what would send a terrible message to them. Because the $1 trillion bill, although it's a okay bill, it's incredibly insufficient and inadequate. But the $3.5 bill, it's not the best, but at least it begins to address some of the problems that we face in this country. But they're against it. They're against it because their corporate interests are against it. And they do the bidding of their corporate interests. And so hopefully the progressives in the House don't bend, don't fold, and don't vote for their bill until they get what they want. They got to be willing to put it all on the line. They folded so much. And I also want to touch on one thing before I end this video. The corporate Democrats, Nancy Pelosi included, who's actually on the right side of this, they, the Biden administration, in over every election, what do? They support the corporate candidate. I mean, we just saw it with Nina Turner, with the backing of Shontel Brown, with the flooding of all this money, Republican money, etc. I've talked about it endlessly. It doesn't need to be rehashed. But they always support the Republican candidates. The 9 Democrats that are holding out, although some may have defected, they supported over progressive candidates. So what I'm saying is, instead of some of those people being there that are holding out, more progressive people could be there. And they would have no problem voting for this bill because this is what they believe in. You see, it's coming back to bite them in the ass because they're supporting of the corrupt corporate candidates. This is what happens. See, when you have an agenda or you actually want to pass sweeping legislation, they'll come in and derail and say no. But see, it didn't have to be that way. You could have supported what your base supports, the values of giving people health care, education, stopping the climate crisis, etc. But you chose corporate interests, and now it's coming to bite you in the ass.